Part 8 of Chapter 11 is devoted to various strategies and techniques that can be used as a part of a general response plan to various risk events. So after identifying and quantifying risks, you must decide how to respond to the risks or both positive and negative events that you have identified. Now, when it comes to responding to negative risks, there are four main response strategies. One response strategy is risk avoidance. In other words, you're planning to do whatever it takes to avoid that particular negative event from occurring. The second general response strategy is risk acceptance. In other words, you acknowledge that this event can happen, but you accept it. In other words, you don't do anything proactively to eliminate that risk. You just anticipate that risk, and you may have some ideas what you will do if this negative event occurs. Risk transference, as the name suggests, is a strategy or tactic for transferring a potential negative risk, either fully or partially, on another party. For example, if you foresee a particular risk, you may want to make this risk as a part of the vendor's equation. In other words, if something goes wrong with the hardware that you're purchasing, you want that risk to be dealt with or expenses related to dealing with this risk covered by the vendor of the hardware and not your organization or your team. Now, risk mitigation means preparing for the risk to occur so that its impact is minimized. So it's kind of similar to avoidance, but it means that you cannot avoid it fully. Instead, you prepare to respond in such a way where the negative impact of that risk is minimized. Now, when it comes to avoiding technical risks, financial risks, or schedule risks, there's general high-level responses to risks falling in those three categories. Those responses, they are somewhat generic, but they can be translated into something specific depending on the specific collection of risks that you have identified. You may want to pause for a minute or two and look at those possible response strategies to technical, cost, and schedule risks. Now, when it comes to strategies for responding to positive risks or positive events, you have the following strategies or techniques. Risk exploitation. You anticipate that something is positive will happen, and you prepare yourself for the exploitation of that positive outcome. For example, let's say if you think that that agile approach to project management will help you shorten the duration of the project and save cost, then you want to make sure that agile practices are used throughout the entire project, so the likelihood of this positive risk is enhanced. Risk sharing. Risk sharing means sometimes positive outcomes, they can hardly be achieved unless you collaborate with somebody. So you collaborate with another party to make sure that this positive event actually occurs. So basically, you need somebody's help, and you get this person or organization on board, and then both of you will enjoy those positive outcomes that this positive event, positive risk will bring. Risk enhancement means manipulating the triggers of a particular positive event, so that you increase the likelihood and the impact of this positive event. For example, I was talking about exploiting possible benefits of agile project management by mandating everybody to use agile techniques. And enhancement means you really train people, you make sure they are consistent in using agile. You make sure that everybody is using it on a daily basis. So you go kind of one step beyond exploitation, and actually you want to make sure that you have the maximum savings or the maximum benefits possible. And risk acceptance, just like negative risk acceptance, it kind of means you do nothing, you anticipate a risk, but you don't necessarily prepare to exploit or manipulate any triggers to enhance it. Now, no matter how much time you spend identifying risks and creating strategies, there will be like a secondary risks, something that will be a result of your activities, and you may want to also think about those residual and secondary risks. Residual risks are risks that remain after all of the response strategies have been implemented. So in other words, you've done everything, but there's still something that is remaining. You failed to address the risk completely. Or sometimes there are secondary risks. They are a direct result of implementing a risk response. So you have a risk response strategy, you go ahead and implement it, but after implementing this response strategy, something else goes wrong as a result of this response strategy implementation. So you may want to brainstorm about residual risk, something that will be remaining or something that will be created as a result of your risk mitigation strategy, and capture those residual risks and secondary risks in your risk management plan.